Thanks in part to programmes such as Cracker and Prime Suspect back in the day, right through to the brand new series of CSI, our interest in forensic science has never been so high. And here in Dundee, the Dundee Science Centre and the University of Dundee are taking the world of forensic science into the heart of communities right across the city. Welcome to CSI, CS Why, CS How.
Over the past 6 weeks, hundreds of Dundonians of all ages have been involved in a high-profile murder case. They were part of the forensic team that gathered DNA and fingerprint evidence at the scene, and ultimately were part of the jury that sat through witness testimonials and evidence from the accused himself. Far-fetched? An episode from a new, gripping drama perhaps? Not quite, but it was almost real life for the participants on CSI, CS Why, CS How. Now we want to take you on that journey.
Well, community engagement has always been part of our vision here at Dundee Science Centre, to be a hub for community engagement and learning for everybody in our community. So after doing a number of outreach programmes with various groups in the area, we found that a longer sort of programme of engagement works an awful lot better than just one-off engagements. It's a much more enriching and enjoyable experience for everybody. Through our work with the community groups, we found that forensic science was a really popular topic. So this is when we decided to approach Professor Sue Black and her colleagues at the Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification at the University of Dundee to start this project.
Well, we've got a very strong relationship with Dundee Science Centre anyway, so the university at Dundee has always worked really well with them. And we've also done a number of forensic experiments and sort of events with them. But this one really, I think at the end of the day, we decided needed to be something a bit bigger. And I think it was probably your brainchild.
Yes, a little bit. It came off a conversation with some of our colleagues in the Science Centre around a project that they wanted to run for a prolonged period of time and that they wanted to use to bring science into the more disadvantaged communities around Dundee. And as a consequence of that, between us, we came up with this idea of having something that was tagged a little bit more to a realistic type of set of scenarios in terms of a murder scene. And fair credit absolutely goes to our colleagues in the Science Centre. They came up with the scenario and they did all of the preparation material. Our job was very easy.
Yeah.
So did you ask the community groups what they wanted to study, or was it a foregone conclusion that forensic science was the way forward?
Well, we asked them, through all of our community engagement work, we go out to the community centres, first of all, meet the groups and find out what interests them, and then we try to make tailor-made programmes so it's exactly what they're looking for and it's towards their needs. So a lot of the groups had found that forensic science was something they were really interested in. We did some taster sessions with them and then found that that was definitely the way to go forward.
There's a fair chunk of money thrown at this project. Where did that come from?
This came from BIS, the Business and Innovation Skills, that funded this project. So we were really excited and we would never have been able to run this without that funding to support us. We had 200 participants from community groups take part in the 6-week learning course, and then our celebration days were open to the public where a lot more people were able to take part in the taster events then.
And what did you do once you got into the communities? What sort of tasks did you get them to undertake?
They were taking their own fingerprints, they were taking other people's fingerprints, they were learning how to read the DNA slides, they were learning how to tell the differences between fingerprints, they were understanding a bit about the legal process. They came into the university on 2 occasions and we had a forensic panel, which meant that they could ask any questions they like of the experts. They then headed off to Abertay and they went around the laboratories, the science laboratories at Abertay. So they've really gone out and done lots and lots of work around it, and it will culminate. Some of the individuals, our judge, who was Eddie Small, is in fact a creative writer, and so beyond today, what they have the opportunity is to go and commit this if they want into Word, whether it be poetry, prose or otherwise, and he'll do either short bits or long bits of work with them for those who want to.
Once the court scene's finished, we're going to get some of the groups involved in creative writing to cover lasting memory of what happened.
So take me through that process. Is it a creative writing of what they've been through, or the court case, or the crime itself?
We're absolutely going to be very flexible on it, so each person might take a different view on it. Some might write as from the viewpoint of being one of the people in the case. There might be somebody that has an overview of the whole affair. So really, there are so many perspectives, and hopefully we'll get people from different perspectives, so we've got a real sense of how it happened and what happened.
I was speaking to a couple of people in the court, and they had followed this religiously for 5 weeks, so they really got caught up in the whole atmosphere.
Yes, absolutely, and some of them really got, as you said, really engaged in the process. They were doing timelines for the murder, they were doing maps to show linkages and possible linkages across the different individuals that were involved in the case. So they got tremendously involved in it, I think. In the open sessions that we did up at the university, there was a real engagement across all of the groups that we spoke with in terms of the questions that they asked, in terms of how just they responded both to us but also to each other. And I think that one of the most important things for us is to bring a bit of a reality into how forensic evidence and scientific evidence in general is used within the criminal justice system, so that it's not like CSI. And I think we achieved that. I think that our participants very much enjoyed themselves, and I think that they've gone away with a stronger appreciation of how science can be used, and that's the real winner here as well.
What's been the most fascinating part of the course for you over the past 6 weeks?
I think fingerprints is always something, and DNA I didn't know anything about. You watch the television programmes and you pick up bits and pieces, and it's nice to actually do things like that, and this is, a little bit more knowledge, and it's been very interesting, yes.
Now, without doubt, the most compelling and dramatic aspect of the project was the court case, where participants became the jury. They listened to evidence from the prosecution and, of course, the defence, from expert witnesses and from the accused himself. The jury had 3 not very simple choices: guilty, not guilty, or not proven. And while the court case was the dramatic conclusion of the project, it felt very, very real indeed.
In the court scenario, we're dealing with twins, one of which is in the dock. And it was quite fascinating to hear that the DNA for identical twins can't be split. It is exactly the same, but fingerprints are different.
Yeah, well, the DNA is inherited from the parents, so twins get the same information from both parents. But the fingerprints, they're created during the time in the womb, so the pressures and the forces on the skin during that development creates the fingerprints, so each can experience differences, and that's where you get the differences arising in their fingerprints that can then be distinguished.
So, after all that DNA and fingerprint evidence, testimonials and feisty exchanges between prosecution and defence, what was the decision of the jury?
Just out of court, to the victor the spoils.
Thank you.
Were you expecting that result?
I think in an honest moment we would have probably placed our money on a not proven, because that would have been the right result. I don't think it was proven at all. But the debate that they had went on for a long time, and there's the winner. Certainly he should not have been found guilty on the basis of the evidence that we presented today. Most definitely not. But to get an innocent and not guilty charge, all down to the sheer skill of the defence advocate.
And what did you think of the court experience earlier today?
Well, it brought back memories to me, because I've been on a jury twice before, and that was many years ago. But I found it very interesting.
I think it was giving you more knowledge of the process from the murder scene straight through to the end of the trial. It'll give you a better grasp of what actually happens.
It's been very interesting. I think it's shown the difficulty that jury members have, in deciding verdict, and the court procedure is very interesting as well. And even the forensics, like the previous couple said, it's not as easy as it looks on television, and we may think, I thought he was guilty, but there wasn't enough evidence, and we've got to be sure,
So in terms of real life CSI, not as glamorous as it shows on the TV?
Oh, not at all. No, hard work was into it. No. Even the court case, it's not something you take lightly. It's
quite daunting. Yeah, quite daunting.
After 6 weeks of unique and thrilling community engagement, What's the conclusion?
So Rebecca, tell me, what's the next steps in this particular project?
Now the groups are going to be invited to take part in a creative writing course with the University of Dundee, where they're going to be able to capture all of their thoughts and look at the story from perhaps a different perspective, our murder case, and record that. So it's going to be a lasting legacy for the community groups and us to share with one another. They'll also be invited to take part in discussion groups around good life, good death, good grief, to encourage people in Scotland to be slightly more open about talking about death and preparing themselves for that as well.
So what are the top line results from the project?
I think a lot of people have found that they are really interested in engaging with science, whereas before they maybe thought science was scary and it was something that wasn't for me. So that feeling's been overcome. Some of our community groups now want to take part in college courses and go back into education, which again is something that we're really excited about. It's brought groups together from different areas across Fife and Dundee who now are going to work together again in the future as well.
The course that we did showed it in the true light. It wasn't as it was on television. Not as easy as you see on television.
It's been a unique project, not just for Dundee, but for Scotland. And should it go ahead, hopefully next year, how would you encourage somebody watching this to take part if they haven't taken part this year?
I think what this year's proved is the more authentic you can make the whole fair, the more gripping it is, the more interesting it is. I think the real way we'd get more people in is speaking to the people who've gone through it this year, including the actors and the experts.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. I think it's brilliant that we can take the Hollywoodness away from it and make it more real and bring people into the real scenario and see how this is actually done. And as Eddie said, the testimony of the previous people who have taken part will really encourage, I think, other people to partake and see that it's not just the scientists that can do it.
And there's been a lot of team members from the Dundee Science Centre and other partners involved, of course. But from your team's point of view, what's been the most enjoyable part of the project?
I don't think I could pinpoint a single moment in it. For me, this has been the most enjoyable part of my career so far. I've loved meeting the groups, I've loved working alongside the people from the Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification. We've loved learning about forensic science and we've loved delivering the project, so just everything for me.